Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. You know we love to dig into the latest news and trends, and today we're taking you all the way to Nigeria, where there's a kind of fascinating financial standoff brewing that honestly could have ripple effects way beyond their borders. It all revolves around this thing called USSD.
And that's a really good point to start off with because a lot of people might not be familiar with USSD.
Exactly. I had to do a little research myself. We're going to break it all down, but just to give everyone a little teaser, it's basically a way to access banking services even without a smartphone or data connection, like even in remote areas. And we've got some really compelling sources to help us unpack all of this: news articles, financial reports, even some firsthand accounts.
It's really a perfect example of how technology is trying to keep up with the need to make sure everyone has access to these essential services.
Right. So before we get to all the drama, can we just take a step back and explain what USSD actually is? I'm picturing someone in a small village, they need to send money to their family. But there's limited internet, no smartphone, no fancy banking app.
And that's exactly where USSD comes in. So essentially,
Yeah.
it lets you use a really basic mobile phone to do all sorts of financial transactions.
Yeah.
You can check your balance, transfer money, pay bills, all with just a few codes. You're just typing in codes on your phone, almost like texting your bank.
Okay, so it's like texting your bank. See, that makes so much more sense to me now. But even with that, I was blown away when I saw the numbers. Our sources say that something like N2.19 trillion, which is, I don't even know how many US dollars at the time, but a LLOT worth of transactions were made through USSD in just 6 months. Trillions with a T.
Yeah, that's not surprising when you consider the numbers from the Central Bank of Nigeria. They reported over 252 million USSD transactions just between January and June of last year. So it's obviously a huge part of daily life for so many people there.
Okay, so we've established that USSD is a big deal in Nigeria, but this is where things start to get interesting. 9 major banks are actually facing potential disconnection from this whole USSD system, and it's because they owe money to the telecom companies. We're talking big names here, too. Fidelity Bank, First City Monument Bank, Jaiz Bank. I mean, the list goes on.
And even though those names might not be as familiar to people outside of Nigeria, these banks are really important for their economy. Millions of customers rely on them.
So are we talking about a global banking crisis here?
I mean, it could definitely have ripple effects for sure, even on international investments.
Okay, so what's going on? Why are these banks in so much trouble? Fill us in on the debt situation.
Well, it boils down to a disagreement about who's responsible for paying for the USSD service.
Yeah.
See, the banks are using the telecom companies' networks to offer all these services, but they can't agree on who should be paying for the infrastructure behind it.
So it's a classic case of you built the roads, but we're the ones driving on them, so why should we have to pay? Am I right?
Exactly. The debt started out at over N200 billion, and it's now down to N160 billion, but that's still a massive amount. And get this, some invoices haven't been paid since 2020.
Oh, wow. So are the telecom companies just saying, pay up or we're cutting you off?
Well, they're definitely applying pressure, but the banks are pushing back too. They're saying that the telecom companies are also benefiting from this whole thing because people are using more data for mobile banking, so they think the cost should be shared.
It sounds like a bit of a chicken or the egg situation to me.
Yeah.
But either way, this has some serious consequences if it doesn't get resolved. We could be talking about millions of people suddenly losing access to their money.
Absolutely. It would be devastating.
It's like someone taking away your debit card. In a world where everything is going cashless. So what's being done? We've got this deadline looming, January 27th.
Well, the Nigerian Communications Commission, the NCC, they're stepping in to try and mediate.
So they're like the referees in this financial football match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to throw some flags. They've already issued warnings to the banks, and they've even told the public that there could be service disruptions.
So this is getting serious.
Very serious.
Wow. We've got 9 banks on the clock, millions of people hanging in the balance, and a regulatory body trying to keep everything from falling apart. This is like a financial thriller in real life. What happens next? We'll have to wait and see. But we'll be back to dive into all of the potential fallout and maybe even some possible solutions, so stay tuned.
It really could be a huge problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the big picture, but what would this actually look like? For everyday Nigerians if they can't use USSD.
Well, just imagine a market vendor in Lagos. Someone who relies on USSD every day to do business. They use it to buy goods from suppliers. And then they get paid by their customers using USSD. Suddenly, they can't use their phone anymore. It's like their whole livelihood is threatened.
It's like their digital lifeline is cut off.
Exactly. And it's not just businesses either. Think about the families in rural areas. who depend on money being sent to them through USSD. Money for things like food and medicine. It could be devastating.
It's really making me think about how much we take for granted, the ability to just like transfer money instantly.
Right. And Nigeria has been making such progress with financial inclusion, getting more people into the formal banking system. Something like this could really set them back.
So this isn't just some squabble between companies, this is about real people's lives.
It's a potential economic and social crisis.
So with the clock ticking, is anyone trying to find a solution here?
Well, the NCC is trying to mediate, encourage both sides to compromise.
But I bet those negotiations are pretty tense.
Yeah, I mean, you've got powerful entities involved. Everyone's trying to protect their own interests.
What are some of the main sticking points? What's preventing them from reaching an agreement?
A lot of it comes down to how much the bank should be paying.
For using the USSD system?
Right? The banks want to keep the fees low because that makes it more accessible for everyone. They say it's a matter of national priority.
But the telecom companies want to get paid for their infrastructure.
Exactly. They argue that those low fees aren't sustainable, not if they want to maintain a reliable network.
So it's affordability versus sustainability.
And both sides have valid points.
It sounds like a really tough situation.
It is. And then there's the added layer of complexity. Both the banks and the telecom companies believe they're the ones bringing the real value here.
Oh, how so?
Well, the banks argue that they're bringing in all the customers and that all the mobile banking activity generates data usage, which benefits the telecom companies.
And I'm guessing the telecom companies say, hold on a second. Without our network, you wouldn't have any mobile banking in the first place.
Exactly.
It's like a who came first, the chicken or the egg kind of debate. But in the meantime, it's the users who are stuck in the middle. So have there been any ideas thrown around, for a possible solution?
Well, one idea is to create a revenue sharing model.
Okay, so like splitting the profits.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It would involve both the banks and the telecom companies contributing to a shared pool based on how much money they each make from USSD transactions.
That seems fair enough. What's the catch?
Some people are worried about how complicated it would be to set up and whether it would be transparent enough.
Right, because no one wants a shady backroom deal.
Exactly.
Huh.
And there are also concerns that it could lead to higher transaction fees.
Which would defeat the whole purpose of making banking more accessible.
Right.
So it's a balancing act.
Always a balancing act.
It makes me wonder, though, about the long-term future of USSD, especially as more people in Nigeria get smartphones. Will it eventually just be replaced by mobile apps and internet banking?
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people are asking right now. This whole situation could actually be a catalyst for exploring some different technologies.
Like what?
Well, things like SMS-based banking, or maybe mobile apps that can work even without an internet connection.
So you're saying this crisis could actually be an opportunity?
Exactly. It could force everyone to start thinking about the future.
And to make sure Nigeria's financial system is ready for whatever comes next.
Precisely. The decisions they make now will have a big impact, not just on the immediate situation, but on the long-term future of their digital economy.
Wow. This whole story is really eye-opening. It makes you realize that this isn't just a Nigerian issue. This is something that countries all over the world are going to have to grapple with.
You're absolutely right. As more and more people rely on mobile banking, we're going to see similar challenges and opportunities emerge everywhere.
So what can other countries learn from what's happening in Nigeria?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is that it's crucial to have open communication between everyone involved.
Right, like the banks, the telecom companies, and the government?
Exactly, because if they don't talk to each other
Yeah.
and try to find common ground, it's the everyday people who will suffer.
It's a reminder that even in the digital age, human connection and collaboration are still essential. It's a tough spot to be in, for sure. Do they stick with something that might be on its way out, or do they use this whole mess as a chance to try something new?
It really is a defining moment for them, and honestly, for any country that's thinking about going all in on mobile banking.
So what can other countries learn from all of this drama in Nigeria?
Well, one of the biggest lessons is that you can't just rely on one system, even if it's been really successful like USD has been. You need to have backup options.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Exactly.
So what kind of backup options are we talking about?
Well, there's SMS-based banking, for one. And then there are mobile apps that can work offline. Those could be more reliable in the long run.
Makes sense. And what about the whole regulatory side of things?
Yeah, that's another crucial point. You need to have really clear rules in place, especially when it comes to who's responsible for what and how much things should cost.
Because technology moves so fast.
Right. The regulations need to be able to keep up.
And we can't forget about the users themselves.
Absolutely. Consumer
Yeah.
education is so important. As more and more people start using mobile banking,
Mm.
they need to understand how it all works, what the risks are, and how to protect themselves.
Give them the tools to navigate this new world.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical details of USSD to the financial standoff in Nigeria, and even the global implications of all of this. Any final thoughts?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that technology alone can't solve all our problems. If we want to create a financial system that works for everyone, we need to work together. We need to have smart policies, and we need to make sure that people have the knowledge and resources they need to thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep learning about this stuff. Dive into the world of mobile money, research the different platforms out there, and think about the ethical side of all of this.
The future of finance is being shaped right now, and we all have a part to play.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We've seen how technology can connect us, but we've also seen how things can go wrong.
And the importance of finding solutions that work for everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.